In 478 BCE, just 1 year after the Persian Wars ended, a group of Greek city-states, mostly in Ionia and on the islands between mainland Greece and Ionia, created the Delian League. Their goal was simple. They wanted to keep protecting the Greeks who lived in Ionia from Persian attacks because the Persian Empire was still strong and many people feared Persia might come back again. A Greek city-state was like a small country with its own city, laws, and leaders, even though all the people spoke Greek and shared many traditions. Some city-states were rich from trade, some were strong on land, and some were strong at sea. When they joined together, they hoped they could be safer than if they stood alone. Athens led the league, and the first meeting took place on the small island of Delos. Delos was not chosen by accident. It sat in the Aegean Sea, between mainland Greece and the Greek communities closer to Asia, so it was a good middle meeting place. In Greek mythology, the twin gods Apollo and Artemis were born on Delos. Because of this, the island was seen as sacred, meaning it was thought to belong to the gods in a special way. People also felt that a holy place could help keep the alliance fair because it was not the home city of any one powerful member. Because Delos was seen as sacred, it made a good neutral headquarters for the new alliance. Neutral means it did not seem like Athens or any other city was fully in charge of the meeting place itself. At least at the start, the League wanted to feel like a group of partners, not a group with one boss. Member states could choose to contribute money as a tax, which most chose, or provide ships for the League's navy. This choice mattered a lot. Cities that paid money were basically trusting Athens to do the fighting at sea, while Athens used the money to build and run ships and pay crews. A navy is the part of a military that fights on the water. Greek naval power depended on fast warships and trained rowers who could move together like a team. When many allies paid money instead of sending ships, Athens's navy grew bigger and bigger because Athens was the one building and controlling most of the ships. The League's treasury, where member taxes were stored, was kept on Delos. A treasury is like a giant protected money storage place for a government or an alliance. This was the League's shared money, meant for shared goals, especially defense against Persia. Keeping the money on Delos matched the idea of neutrality. If the money stayed on Delos, then, in theory, it belonged to the whole League, not just to Athens. That was the plan at the beginning, and it helped allies feel safer about joining. Over the next 20 years, the Delian League slowly changed from a loose alliance led by Athens into a more organized and official system. Loose alliance means the cities were connected, but they still acted a lot like independent partners. More organized means more rules, more control, and less freedom to disagree. At the same time, Athens's leadership started to look more like the rule of an empire. An empire is a system where one powerful place controls other places, even if those places would rather control themselves. Athens was still calling it an alliance, but its actions began to feel like the actions of a ruler. One big reason this happened is that Athens had the strongest navy. Ships were expensive and took skilled workers, wood, metal, and lots of training. Because Athens controlled the most ships, Athens could also pressure other cities, and pressure often turns a partnership into something closer to control. The few members who tried to leave the League, such as the island of Naxos, quickly found out that leaving was not really allowed because their rebellion was crushed by force. In other words, when a member tried to quit, Athens treated it like a revolt, not like a normal decision. Naxos was one of the earliest signs that not everyone felt happy in the League. When a city realizes it cannot leave without being attacked, it starts to look less like a team and more like a system of control. That fear can make other members stay quiet, even if they feel upset. When Athens crushed revolts, it also sent a message to other members: if you try to leave, you might be punished too. This kind of message can keep an empire together, but it also builds resentment, which means angry feelings that can grow over time. Then, in 454 BCE, the Delian League's treasury was moved to Athens. This was a huge change, because now the shared money was stored inside the leading city's walls, where Athens could watch it, protect it, and also control it more easily. Some explanations said the move was for safety, like protecting the money from Persian threats or danger at sea. But once the money was in Athens, it also became much easier for Athens to use it the way Athens wanted. That is one reason this event is often seen as a turning point. That move marked the change from the Delian League into the Athenian Empire. The league still existed as a name in some ways, but the power balance had changed. When the leader city holds the treasury, controls most of the ships, and forces members to stay, the system has become closer to an empire than an alliance. Because the Athenians publicly carved into stone each year the 1/60th share of the tribute that they dedicated to Athena, records still exist listing which members paid tribute in many different years. Think of this like writing a yearly public list that everyone could see, showing who paid and that part of the payment was offered to the goddess.
These stone records matter because historians can read them thousands of years later. When you have lists of names and payments, you can start to see patterns: who paid, who stopped paying, and how wide Athens' control reached. That is how history can sometimes be tracked through money. This allows historians to see how large and powerful the Athenian system became. The more cities paying tribute, the more money Athens had. And the more money Athens had, the more ships and soldiers it could support, and the more it could enforce its control over the sea. Even though only the Athenian side of the story survives, it seems that Athens' allies in the Delian League were not pleased that the alliance had turned into a full Athenian empire. When we say only the Athenian side survives, it means we have more writings and records from Athens than from the smaller cities, so we often hear the story the way Athens told it. Still, the basic situation is clear. Many allies expected mutual defense, not permanent payments and forced membership. Paying tribute year after year can feel like being taxed by a ruler instead of contributing to a shared cause. That is one reason alliances can break apart or turn into wars later. People who were not allies were affected too. Even cities that stayed outside the league had to deal with the fact that Athens' navy could travel far and pressure islands, trade routes, and nearby regions. When a single city becomes the strongest sea power, many neighbors feel the impact. The 5th century BCE Athenian historian Thucydides describes in his history one especially harsh treatment of the small island of Melos, which basically refused to join Athens' side. Melos is famous because it shows how hard Athens could push when it wanted control, especially later during the bigger Peloponnesian War period. Thucydides' story about Melos is often connected to the Melian dialogue, where the Athenians and the Melians argue about power, fairness, and survival. It is remembered because it shows a cold, serious idea. Powerful states may do what they want, and weaker states may suffer if they cannot defend themselves. To make matters worse, after the treasury had been moved to Athens, the Athenians used some of the league's money for their own building projects. This upset many allies because the money had been collected for protection and war, not for fancy buildings in Athens. The most famous of these projects was the Parthenon, the great temple to Athena on the Acropolis. The Acropolis was the high, rocky hill in Athens with important temples, almost like a sacred center of the city. The Parthenon became a symbol of Athens' power, pride, and art. The Parthenon was not only a religious building, it also sent a message to everyone who visited Athens. Athens is rich, skilled, and strong. When allies saw their money turned into stone and marble on the Athenian hilltop, many likely felt anger and frustration because it made Athens look like the winner in the relationship. The bold choice to move the Delian League treasury to Athens was the idea of the leading Athenian statesman of the 5th century BCE, Pericles. A statesman is a political leader who guides the government, especially during important times. Pericles is one of the most famous leaders Athens ever had. Coming from a powerful aristocratic family, Pericles was the top politician in Athens for about 40 years, from the early 460s BCE until his death in 429 BCE. Even though Athens was a democracy, leaders could still become extremely influential if they were trusted, persuasive, and successful. During Pericles' time, Athens grew in wealth, culture, and confidence. This period is often called part of Athens' Golden Age because so many famous buildings, artworks, and ideas appeared then. But at the same time, Athens' growing control over others also grew. Pericles played a major role in developing a more popular democracy in Athens. That means more ordinary citizens could take part in public life, not just the richest people. In a direct democracy, citizens could vote in assemblies, and Athens became known for that kind of participation. Under his leadership, Athens seems to have developed a strong and energetic sense of patriotic pride. Patriotic pride means the people strongly loved their city and believed it was special. This can encourage citizens to work hard and defend their home, but it can also make them feel they deserve to lead others. Soon after the treasury was moved to Athens, Pericles supported a citizenship decree in 451 BCE. This was a major rule about who counted as an Athenian citizen, and citizenship mattered because it decided who could vote and fully participate in the government. This law restricted Athenian citizenship from then on to people who had two freeborn Athenian parents who were legally married, and both parents also had to be born to Athenian parents. In simple terms, Athens made citizenship harder to get, so fewer people could become citizens, and more people were left out. A law like this can change society in big ways. It can strengthen a group's identity, meaning people feel more like we are Athenians, but it can also create stronger lines between insiders and outsiders. In a city full of trade and visitors, rules about belonging could cause tension.
Then, around 449 BCE, Pericles successfully proposed a decree that allowed Athens to use Delian League funds for Athenian building projects. This is one of the clearest examples of the alliance shifting into empire. Money collected from many places was now officially allowed to be used to improve Athens itself. With that money, Athens could pay builders, artists, stonecutters, and planners. Big building projects can also create jobs, which can make citizens happy at home. So inside Athens, some people likely saw these projects as good for the city and good for the people. But outside Athens, many allies likely felt the opposite. If they were paying tribute and seeing Athens grow more beautiful and powerful, they might feel like they were being used. Over time, feelings like that can turn into resistance, rebellion, or support for Athens' enemies. Later in his life, Pericles famously described Athens as the school of Hellas, and because of its growth in art and architecture, the city became a center of philosophy and drama. Hellas means Greece, so this phrase meant he believed Athens was like a teacher to all Greece. In the same era, Athens hosted important dramatic festivals where playwrights showed tragedies and comedies, and citizens gathered to watch. Drama was not just entertainment, it helped Athenians think about politics, justice, leadership, and human behavior. That is one reason Athens became famous for culture. Athens also became known for philosophy, meaning careful thinking and questioning about life, truth, and how people should live. When a city is wealthy and stable enough, it often has more time and money for learning, teaching, debating, and creating art. The rising wealth and power of Athens in the roughly 20 years after the Persian Wars did not go unnoticed by Sparta, and it caused the relationship between the two major Greek powers to become more tense. Sparta was famous for its strong land army and strict lifestyle, and Athens watched Athens grow with suspicion. Sparta and Athens had both fought Persia, but they were very different. Athens was a naval power with a democracy, and Sparta was a land power with a very different political system and a society built around military training. When two very different powers grow side by side, fear and misunderstanding can rise. During the same time, Sparta steadily strengthened the Peloponnesian League, but Sparta's control over that league was not as strict as Athens's control over the Delian League. Sparta led its allies, but it did not usually turn them into tribute-paying subjects the way Athens often did. The Peloponnesian League was based more on land-based support and mutual agreements. Sparta's reputation as the strongest land army gave it influence, and many city-states joined Sparta for protection or shared interests, but the style of control was still different from Athens's tighter grip. Finally, between 460 and 445 BCE, Sparta and Athens fought a series of battles that modern scholars call the First Peloponnesian War. It was not one single battle, but a long stretch of conflict with different fights and shifts, showing how uneasy peace had become. This earlier war matters because it shows that the rivalry did not suddenly appear in 431 BCE. Instead, tension built over time as Athens grew, as alliances hardened, and as both sides watched each other's moves. It was like a storm forming slowly before the lightning strikes. In 445 BCE, both sides agreed to a 30 years peace, a treaty that let each side return to what it controlled before the war, with only a few exceptions. A treaty is a formal agreement to stop fighting, and this one was meant to last a long time, which shows how tired both sides were. The idea of the treaty was to reduce conflict by setting boundaries. If each side agreed, you control your allies and we control ours, then maybe the fighting could stop. But even when a treaty is signed, fear can remain, and fear can keep pushing people toward war again. Still, Sparta's discomfort during this period of Athenian growth and success, which had helped lead to the First Peloponnesian War, was only a warning sign of an even larger conflict in the future. The bigger conflict would later be called the Great Peloponnesian War, and it would change Greek history. As the Athenian general and historian Thucydides later wrote about the causes of the Great Peloponnesian War, which began in 431 BCE, but the real cause of the war was one that was formally kept out of sight. The growing power of Athens and the fear that it inspired in Sparta made the war inevitable.